Hello, welcome to the Roundtable. This is Roundtable number 21, and I'm your host, Gonzalo Lira. And today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022, and we're going to have a very interesting discussion. I have three wonderful guests, and I'll introduce them to you in turn. Ray McGovern is a former CIA officer. Ray, how's it going? Good to see you, my friend.
Doing well, thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you on again. I have John Kiriakou, the famous CIA whistleblower. John, a pleasure to meet you.
The pleasure's all mine, Gonzalo. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Oh, thank you very much for accepting. It's a real pleasure, a real delight. And Suzie Dawson, a activist on the intelligence fronts. Suzie, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Gonzalo.
Thank you so much for coming on. And the reason I wanted to have you on is that listeners know that I was away for almost 2 weeks because my YouTube channel got suspended, got a strike, because I talked about the malady that shall not be named. So you all three are warned. We cannot mention the malady or much less the medication that's been used for it. But talking about that forthrightly is no longer possible. And what I found fascinating is all these revelations whereby the US government is working with these private platforms to essentially censor information. Now, I actually lived in the Pinochet dictatorship. I always bring this up, that in the Pinochet dictatorship, there was less repression and more free speech in the West than there in Chile back in the day than there is in the West today. And the thing that I find fascinating is how the government has outsourced repressive technology measures. And I want to get your opinion, John, because you're like, you were one of the first whistleblowers that started talking about the excesses of the American intelligence community. And I want to get your opinion about what you think of how the US government is outsourcing repression. What do you think of all of this?
Oh yeah, well, it's a very appropriate question because today is the 75th anniversary of the creation of the CIA.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, kind of funny.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately because there have been calls from some important people whom I have a great deal of respect for, to create a new church committee or something akin to a new church committee.
Mm-hmm.
The church committee did wonderful, historic, amazing work in exposing crimes that the CIA and the FBI were committing against Americans and against foreign nationals. Well, post 9/11, and don't forget that 21 years have already passed since 9/11. The reforms that the church committee enacted have really just fallen by the wayside. We've got a CIA now that has an active assassination program, a CIA that won't even acknowledge that there is such a thing as a drone program, a CIA that had a secret prison system around the world, a CIA that carries out international kidnappings that they euphemistically call renditions. There are so many things that the CIA is doing in the name of the American people, for which there is no oversight or very little oversight, that it's essentially undone all of the good things that the church committee had accomplished. The FBI is just as bad. NSA is just as bad. It's a part of NSA's charter that it's not permitted to collect information on American citizens or U.S. persons. That's anybody here on a green card. And in fact, that's almost exclusively what they do. We haven't even begun talking about DARPA and about the myriad of contractors and defense and intelligence related consulting firms around the Beltway here in Washington. Gonzalo, it's not an accident that there are now more millionaires per capita in the Washington, D.C. area than anywhere else in America, including Silicon Valley. It's not an accident.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of people got very rich thanks to 9/11 and its aftermath.
And
But
what I find incredible is how so many of the repressive measures that are being implemented by the American government are being subcontracted out, so that there's
absolutely,
liability.
absolutely. I mean, look at well, they call them butts in the seats. That's what they call them at the CIA. They're people who don't really work for the CIA. They work for Booz Allen Hamilton, or they work for SAIC or CACI or any one of a number of outfits, and they have a butt in a seat, and they punch in information in a computer, or they run some clandestine program. The CIA doesn't have to pay for their health insurance or their pension contribution, and then everybody's happy. But then at the same time, even while everybody's happy, there's no accountability.
Yeah.
There's nobody that has to answer to anyone. Again, one of the great things that came out of the church committee was the creation of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence as the oversight committees for the intelligence community. Well, they're just cheerleading organizations now. They don't oversee anything.
Yeah, I saw a video of yours, Suzie, that how you discussed the motivation of these intelligence firms, since there are for-profit corporations. They want to be increasing their revenue, and so basically they start targeting everybody.
Yeah, well, that's the problem when you subcontract the targeting of citizens to for-profit agencies. In order for them to make more profit, they need to target more people. And I think I mentioned, and I think I know the film that you're talking about, and I mentioned in there how when security cameras first came into residential areas or commercial districts, you had like one camera and then another kilometer, one camera, and then it was like 800 meters and it was 600 meters, and now you have 4 cameras on the same wall of the same shop. And it's just this cycle where to make more money, they have to target more people.
Did you hear about how there's an AI that if you take a picture on Instagram, this AI can look at the picture and figure out which cameras were filming you while you took the picture and show them to you? And this is a commercially available product that is for people's amusement. So in terms of intelligence, you can imagine how much you're being surveilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And studying NSA documents from Snowden files, you see the same thing. They talk about wanting to be able to geolocate to the meter anywhere on the planet, no matter which country it's in. They do it from space, the National Geospatial Agency. They do it NRO as well. NSO, National Surveillance Office, is it? I think Ray would know. There's a whole bunch of these agencies that are aside from CIA and NSA, which are part of this ecosystem of spying. And they're agencies that in some cases have more personnel than NSA or CIA, but which nobody ever even hears about. But their end game, and they admit it in their own documents, that their end game is to create a control grid of the entire planet. It's in black and white in their own documents.
It's basically a panopticon prison where the warden can see every single prisoner and nobody can make a move without any kind of freedom. Ray, let me ask you to bring you into the conversation. How do we solve this? What would be the practical steps necessary in order to change this around and have an intelligence service that does its job but serves the people and doesn't try to, in essence, it seems to me, kind of like enslave the people?
Well, Gonzalo, I compliment you on your Greek derivative panopticon.
Yeah.
It literally means see everything, and that's pretty much, as Suzie has already indicated, the name of the game. Now, I'd like to go back to what John Kiriakou said.
Sure.
He's an expert on torture, having refused to be trained in the techniques of enhanced interrogation techniques, and having blown the whistle on it. Now, it's a very courageous thing to do. It ended up with him having to spend 2 years in prison. I visited John in prison. I saw what kinds of folks were there with John, and how I was so glad that John could defend himself. That's neither here nor there. Let's talk about the so-called oversight committees, right? Well, long since they have become overlook committees.
That's right.
These are the overlook committees of the Senate and the House. Now, just yesterday, a federal judge or district judge ruled that we are not allowed to see the extensive 6,700 page Senate Intelligence Committee research document on CIA torture based on CIA documents. Okay. Now, people need to be reminded how this evolved. It took 5 years to do. It started out when under the order of Gina Haspel, the chief CIA person in the first CIA black site in Thailand, waterboarding and worse were done. Okay. She was there. She watched it. She wasn't right there. She watched it through the proverbial window, make sure it was, what she wanted. Okay. Now, the tapes that were made were destroyed. By whom? By Gina Haspel and her boss. Now, even a Republican senator was outraged at that, and we have to have an investigation. Later, the Republicans bowed out of the investigation. But what came out of that was a really gutsy report shepherded by Dianne Feinstein, who unfortunately is now in her dotage. But in those days, uncharacteristically, I think because she stood up for these people that she saw working night and day to get to the bottom of this, and who came by quite felicitously serious, bare, original studies done at the behest of the then CIA director, Leon Panetta. I mean, they had all the goods right there, okay? Now, what happened? They started drafting this thing, and President Obama was opposed to it. He had his chief of staff attend all of these meetings that were ostensibly designed to redact it, to sanitize it, okay? Every one of those meetings, what did this person do? I think it was McCullough, is that his name? Anyhow, he was there to make sure that the CIA interests were protected. Why? Because John Brennan and Barack Obama had this twin relationship where Barack Obama was going to do everything he possibly could to defend John Brennan. Now, when it came out that John Brennan sent his folks into the Senate Intelligence Committee computers, Dianne Feinstein got a little upset at that, okay? Suffice it to say that she oversaw a document of 6,700 pages, but reduced to 525-page redacted executive summary. Now, the summary is enough to indict everyone involved. The summary is awful. You have to the
just the summary.
Yeah, just the summary. I mean, it's redacted, but you learn that these terrible techniques, and they're named, were not effective. They didn't produce any valid information, that the CIA lied about it to the president and to everyone else, that, oh yeah, we're getting good information on terrorism, on anything, and that the techniques themselves were far worse than any briefed to the White House or to anybody else. Okay, those were the main conclusions, and gory detail is included. Now, what happened? It's the end of Dianne Feinstein's term as head of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. What's she going to do? Is she going to go ahead and publish this redacted summary, or is she going to bow like most people and do overlook rather than oversight? I don't know what accounted for her courage. I think it was her loyalty to these folks who worked so hard for her, okay, who did so much and came up with these redacted versions, which spoke volumes in and of themselves. But she was also helped by a senator named Udall. Udall lost his re-election capability, and you'd all said, if you don't release that terrible document, I'm going to release it from the floor of Congress. Whoa, that allowed or propelled even Obama to say, okay, we redacted the 525-page summary. So, all right, let it go out there. And we just will tell the press, don't play it up. It's just, we're trying to catch terrorists straight. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's published in December of 2014, I think. Okay. So what happens? It's pretty much kept the wraps on. And when Richard Burr, I live in North Carolina now, he's still one of our senators. When he became chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, replacing Dianne Feinstein, he said, those are congressional documents. I want them all back here. I'm going to take care of them. Every one of you executive agencies, give me those documents. And they did. Now, I suspect that there may have been one kept at the CIA, but I also suspect that Gina Haspel destroyed that before she left office as, get this, director of the CIA. What's the moral of this story? Well, not only are the Senate and House Intelligence Committees feckless and unable to do what the commission asked them to do very early on, but they actually facilitate the hiding of these things. And I dare say they know that the CIA, the FBI have as much on them as would be very embarrassing were they to step out of line and do the right thing. Lastly, Richard Burr was caught selling stock when he got a briefing on COVID, and he just, really just did what he could to enhance his profits. That's well known. He's going out of office in January, and the sooner the better. But it's not only he. I'll just add one more thing. The Senate Judiciary Committee, headed by a superannuated guy from Iowa, whose name will occur to me in a second. John Kiriakou, you probably will. Grassley. Okay, all right. So here, what happens with respect to Watergate is this lawyer, Kleinsmith, is discovered to have falsified documents to justify a FISA request. Okay, Kleinsmith. Okay, what does he get? Well, his wife is pregnant, and so he gets no jail time. Okay, for deliberately falsifying this document. Okay, that's a felony. Okay, so what happens? Grassley comments in a what do you call that? a tweet. Okay, a Grassley tweet, and he says, "Oh, so this shows that the Justice Department has no power over these people." What happens is it's the Department of Just Us, is what Grassley says, and no one ever go to jail. They take care of themselves. Now, why is this significant? Grassley is the chairman of the damn, almost chairman now. He has been chairman. He'll be chairman again probably of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's 91 years old, I think. That's even older than I am. I think he's even less compos mentis than I am. Sorry to carry on so long.
That's all right. That's all right. It's delightful to hear you. But one of the things I notice, and John helped me out here, because it seems to me that the Obama administration, oddly enough, the Democrat administration, that's all for civil liberties and free speech and all the rest of it, it seemed to be more obsessed with intelligence and cracking down on intelligence than the
I had friends at the White
administration.
House. I had friends at the White House at the time who described Barack Obama's obsession with leaks as Nixonian. It was a Nixonian obsession with national security leaks. And I was told also at the time that this was because of John Brennan. Remember, Obama tried to name Brennan as CIA director in 2009 at the beginning of his first term. And progressives just threw a fit. And so Obama.
The thing is, I just want to be clear. I'm a politically conservative and very conservative at that. And I think that John Brennan is just, he looks like a shyster, drug dealer almost. I mean, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him, to tell you the truth. So I understand the progressives exactly.
There's actually a great story to the career of John Brennan. I worked for John Brennan when I was still on the analytics side at the CIA. John was a GS-15 deputy chief of the Arab-Israeli group in the Office of Near Eastern, South Asian Analysis. Okay? He was a mid-level functionary like so many of us were. And he worked for a woman named Martha Kessler, who was like the U.S. government's leading expert on Syria. Martha wrote a book called Syria, Fragile Mosaic of Power that we all had to read when we went to work.
Oh, God. Oh, so she could get to, pick up some royalties?
Right.
Oh, God,
So
that's bad.
he worked for her, but she didn't like him. And finally he went to her. This was in like 1996, I'm going to say, and 1995. And he said, look, I've worked for you for a long time. I think I'm ready for promotion into the senior intelligence service. And she said that not only will you never be in the senior intelligence service, I don't even want you working for me anymore. You're fired. And at the agency, when you're fired, you're not really fired. You have 6 weeks to walk the halls and find another job. And if you do, you're good. And if you don't, then you're fired.
6 weeks within the agency itself.
Within the agency, exactly. Well, it's Christmas time. And, the normal turnover for jobs is in the summer. So John goes out there and he starts looking for a job. He ends up going to the PDB staff, the President's Daily Brief, where Ray was a star. And because it was off cycle, they were able to offer him a job as a briefer for the lowest ranking person entitled to a PDB briefing. That was the director of intelligence programs at the National Security Council, who at the time happened to be one George Tenet. So, yeah, they immediately hit it off because they were exactly alike. They're mean, aggressive alpha dogs, cigar smoking, just two awful people. Hit it off. George gets promoted to deputy director of the CIA, and he brings John Brennan back with him. And what does he do? He makes John Brennan deputy director of the Office of Near Eastern and South Asian Analysis, Martha Kessler's boss. And so John calls Martha into his office and says, now you're fired.
Okay, I mean, I gotta admit, as a story, it's pretty good and pretty sweet for Brennan. I mean, let's give the devil his due.
The devil is exactly how he should be described.
Oh yeah, I despise
it. Exactly how he should be described.
I mean, please, Suzie, can you give us background on John Brennan? Because you don't want to.
I absolutely no. I think it's important to actually because there's a trail of dead bodies behind John Brennan that not many people talk about, and I don't actually just mean those that you would assume in the war on terror, but I mean actually on Western soil and particularly journalists. And Brennan was the attack dog of Obama. That is true, but Brennan absolutely relished the role, and Brennan had very personal beefs with Julian Assange and with WikiLeaks, but also with someone else who almost never gets talked about. In fact, has almost been disappeared from the discourse. That's an extremely brave Rolling Stone reporter called Michael Hastings. Michael Hastings was going on CNN and MSNBC and major mainstream platforms, and he was completely eviscerating the Obama administration, the war on terror, particularly the US military effort in Afghanistan. He wrote an extremely famous expose on, it was General Stanley McChrystal, am I right, Ray?
Yes,
right.
Who ended up getting fired by Obama on the basis of the reporting of Michael Hastings. Well, Michael Hastings was also the first famous or earliest famous reporter outside of Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras to openly support Snowden. And when I say support Snowden, I mean in the minutes after Snowden coming out. when before he had even left Hong Kong, when everybody was waking up every day expecting that they would see the news that Snowden had been captured or killed. Michael Hastings, go and look at his Twitter timeline at @MM_Hastings and see the tweets I'm talking about. More than 50% of his tweets on his timeline were advocating for Snowden far and wide. And that was at a time where it was extremely dangerous to support Snowden in those first minutes and hours and days after the first Snowden disclosures. Michael Hastings was also working on his next big story at that time, and his next big story was an expose on John Brennan, then director of the CIA. Likely in the context of Brennan's targeting of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, who Hastings had also been outspoken in support of. Hastings had met with Julian several times. Hastings had written a series of articles about Julian and WikiLeaks. So Hastings was on the proverbial shit list, I don't know what else to call it, for a number of reasons, but having taken down a general, having supported WikiLeaks and Julian throughout the smear campaigns and the deplatforming and the attacks that WikiLeaks was facing in that period of 2009 through 2013, then openly advocating for Snowden, and then the final straw in daring to investigate the director of the CIA, John Brennan, and to expose him for his own criminality. Michael Hastings then reported that he believed his vehicle was being tampered with. He borrowed a neighbour's car. He reached out to Jen Robinson, WikiLeaks lawyer, and shared his fears that he was being targeted by the FBI. And his car, his late model BMW, borrowed from the neighbour, in fact, exploded into smithereens on a Los Angeles boulevard. Less than 48 hours after he first started complaining to those around him that he was in fear and he was being severely targeted by US intelligence agencies. That is a US citizen on US soil, exercising their First Amendment rights, exercising their political freedoms, doing so to enormous audiences and with the motivation of protection of truth tellers. And, be it Julian, be it Snowden, be it whoever. And we needed that voice, and we needed that voice. We need that voice now. We've needed it ever since 2013. That voice was silenced, and there was to be an investigation. It was swiftly covered up. Everything was smoothed over, and now nobody speaks the name Michael Hastings. So, in respect to Michael and the work that he did, I wanted to tell that story now. And also, there was something else that made me think of it, and that's John's sacrifice, because John right here is why the world knows about CIA torture. John is why Obama had to address it. John is why there was a report and that we have the information that we do have. And John has paid a deep price for that as well. So I just want to show respect to you too, John. You're amazing.
Go ahead.
Gonzalo.
Go ahead. You don't have to ask permission. Just go.
Well, I'm a Catholic and I always ask for permission.
Well, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I have found it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
With respect to Hastings, thanks so much, Suzie, for bringing that into wider view. What happened to Hastings can be readily explained by something that Julian Assange himself revealed, and that is a so-called set of offensive cyber war tactics that came out of this bevy of things that were released. What was the name of it? Vault 17. Yeah, Vault 7? Yeah, okay. Now, just to remind folks, there were all kinds of really fancy techniques that the CIA had devised and implemented. One of them was you could be asleep in your bedroom and you'd think that your TV was off, right? I think again, the TV is recording everything going on in your bedroom, right? Well, another one of these offensive cyber tools was the ability to take control of a late model car using its computer system, make it go 100 miles an hour without any intervention by brakes or anything else, and cause a crash. Now,
It's
as
actually quite
Suzie.
it's actually quite easy. You know, it could also be done on motorcycles. I know more about motorcycles, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
very
so
easy
does
to do this.
John Kiriakou knows about motorcycles too. John, you can tell that one. Anyhow, what I want to say is the rest of Suzie's story is ironically explained, I think, by Vault 7 documents, and that this is partly why the new CIA director Pompeo branded Julian a non-state terrorist outfit, or is that what he called them?
You know,
A
And
non-state
non
hostile intelligence service.
yeah, non-state hostile intelligence agency, and that's when they really started going after him,
but
using the Ecuadorian patsies to get him out at him finally.
And you know, there's background to that too, which I didn't realize until after the fact.
Mhm.
But if the CIA director declares an organization a non-state actor, then the law says that the agency is exempt from informing the oversight committees if there's an operation against it.
Well, you know, it's all like legalistic bullshit. I mean, you're
Yeah,
you're
it is.
making up your rules so that you can follow these new rules to get what you want. So
That's
you
it.
know, it's legalistic bullshit. I can't think of a nicer term for this. And by the way, you can curse all you want. This channel is demonetized. I'm not making a penny off of these videos, so you know, curse away. You know, although Ray, being a good Catholic boy, he might get the vapors.
Actually, I should revise that. I'm a John 23 progressive Catholic. The Pope and I have very little in common, except for one thing. That is when in 2015, he had the guts to stand up before a joint Congress
Mhm.
and say, you know, the main problem is the blood-drenched arms trade. And all those congressmen got up and said, yeah! Looked in their pocket, see the latest envelope from Lockheed, and
Yeah,
reaching
yeah.
on over here. And I was giving hypocrisy a bad name, okay? But he had it. He had his thumb on it. Why he doesn't act on it is too complicated, but we don't wait for the Pope to act these days. We do it ourselves.
But John, to get back to your point of calling Julian Assange a non-state intelligence service, you know, I mean, like, how is it possible that people just accept this? Because my thinking on the Julian Assange issue, and I really want to have Suzie on, but I guess something's happened to her, and she'll be back.
I'm right here.
There she is. Well, I want to bring the conversation to Julian Assange because, from my point of view, number one, he has not committed any crime in the United States.
No.
Number two, he's not a U.S. citizen. Number three, whenever the government documents were released, he was not in the United States at the time. So how on earth can you justify prosecuting a man who didn't commit a crime in the United States, is not a U.S. citizen, and the crime itself was not committed on American soil? I mean,
yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's frankly the argument that his attorneys are going to make too. Besides the fact that this is a very, very slippery slope.
Actually, hang on, John. Let me rephrase my question. Why is it that the intelligence services hate this guy so much? Why him specifically? Because I've never quite understood. There have been other leakers. I mean, I'm saying this with respect, of course. You yourself were a whistleblower, and I'm sure a lot of people at the CIA were unhappy with you for informing on the things that you did. But why is it that this guy, Julian Assange, is hated so desperately in such a psychopathic way? What was it that triggered this boundless hatred for the man?
We will all have different answers for that. I've definitely got one, but take the floor.
Okay, let's go piece by piece. We'll go John, Suzie, and Ray. You know, just to keep some semblance of order, because I'm really curious. And by the way, I'm gonna mute my camera, but I'm just smoking a cigarette. I'm still here. Okay, go ahead, please, John.
So
why do they hate it?
I'm told that it's twofold. The reason is twofold. First, it's because he was doing it with impunity. He was urging people to send documents. He was offering protection, and you know, he was taking people's personal security very seriously. They were redacting documents to protect the identities of people. That just enraged them. The other thing, and I'm told this is what sort of pushed the agency over the edge, was the release of the Vault 7 documents. Those were the most sensitive, most important crown jewels perhaps ever in the history of the CIA. That was just too much for
A
them.
bridge too
And
far.
so they've gone after him like they have.
But I mean, it's been years now. I mean, he was in that Ecuadorian prison for what, 7 years? I mean, altogether, this drama has been going on for 10. And
Right.
I mean, how does anybody endure that just that hatred for so long? Now, Susie, you have a different view.
Well, there's different sides to Julian. There's Julian, the technologist and software architect who devised the first ever encrypted Dropbox for whistleblowers, what later Secure Drop was modeled off of. Even though some claim otherwise, it is proven to be. There was Julian, the deep political thinker, who was a walking encyclopedia, who had studied so many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of documents that he possessed a uniquely diverse and just profound understanding of how the agencies worked, how the world worked, how geopolitics worked, and was sharing that with other people. There was Julian, my mentor, and the mentor of many independent media people. He would take people under his wing. He would lift them up. He would platform them. He would give them a name, give them exposure, spread their work, share their work. In that regard, he was always increasing the number of us that were working on this type of thing. But probably most importantly of all, and I think personally what they hate him for the most, is there's Julian, who is the only man on the planet who had the ability to, at a whim, seize the global media narrative. When Julian was free and working, even when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, not really free, but still able to work, the empire of lies would have to chase Julian's narrative, chase WikiLeaks' narrative, chase WikiLeaks' work. They were never able to drive that narrative. And you see, since they have seized Julian, kidnapped him from the embassy, since they have silenced him, they have finally, for the first time in the better part of a decade, regained control of that narrative. And now they are driving the narrative. Now, everything you see in the media, everything we're discussing, it's the Russiagate, it's the COVID, it's the whatever is next, it's Ukraine, it's whatever. This is all being planned, strategically planned and devised and implemented by the people who were on the back foot through all those years of Julian's. I nearly said Julian's reign. It was Julian's reign in terms of control of narrative. And I cannot think of any other person on this planet who is able to direct the focus and attention of the media class, of the political class, and of the intelligence agencies the way that he did. And that made him uniquely terrifying to them. Completely terrifying. And they also need to make an example of him, because their deepest fear is that other Julians rise and achieve the same thing. And I'd like to, as my final thought on this, point out that Julian was the crash test dummy for deplatforming. Julian was unpersoned, as you say, before anybody else was. Julian was cut off from PayPal. Julian's bank cards were shut down. Julian went through the massive smear trolling campaigns, online defamation campaigns. Julian was subjected to the false charges, false allegations. Julian was hung out to dry first. And that template now we see being used against, with greater and greater frequency, against more and more people. And that has now become part of the for-profit model. There is now for-profit agencies that not just target for silencing, but smear and deplatform. And everybody is being made into a Julian Assange because they were able to get away with what they did to him. And now they think they have free license. So that is why they hate Julian to the end of time.
Yeah, Ray, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said by Susie and by John, and I have other things that they hate him for. I'm reminded of a of my youth when we used to have Gene Autry pictures, okay?
Mm.
And
Yeah,
he
the
used to
singing
be
cowboy.
he'd be riding through this terrible rock-filled landscape, and the Iragusa Indians are over there. They hate Gene Autry. And they said, why do they hate? They hate Gene Autry from another picture. Okay. So the reason the powers that be hate Julian Assange is from lots of other pictures. And I'll just fill in some of the blanks that I think
Sure.
may arise. First off, Suzie put her finger on it. Back when Julian first appeared, the Fourth Estate was, well, on life support. The Fourth Estate was, as the Princess Bride would say, mostly dead.
Mostly dead.
It was mostly dead, okay? And here comes the Fifth Estate with an instantaneous way of getting valid stuff out into the ether and down into computers. Whoa! It was a difference in kind, okay? It was a shock. And what did these things include? Not only war crimes in Afghanistan or Iraq, but things like warnings. One specific one I'll cite. Warnings by Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, on the 1st of February 2008, calling in Bill Burns, who ironically is now at the CIA. He was ambassador in Moscow. Okay, call him in as Mr. Burns. Do you know what "niet" means? Yeah, I know. Well, "niet" means "niet." If you allow Ukraine into NATO, we are going to have to retaliate because this is a bridge too far. We will have to decide whether we have to intervene, invade Ukraine. So please tell your people, it was Condoleezza Rice at the time, for God's sake, tell your people. Now, Burns, to his credit, played it straight. We have the cable. If I've seen one cable from Moscow Embassy, I've seen about 8,000 of them, okay? We have the cable. WikiLeaks made it available. The title of Burns's cable is "Niet means Niet, Russia's red lines on Ukraine advancement into NATO." It went through the whole 9 yards. Suffice it to say, that's really, really bad for the people who want to fool around with Ukraine, want to fool around with the rest of Eastern Europe. Now, there are a couple other things. I'll be briefer here. 2016, the unpardonable sin, not mentioned yet, but he published documents from the Democratic National Committee that showed that Hillary had stolen the nomination from Bernie Sanders, pure and simple. There they were, right there.
Right there in black and white.
There's another unpardonable sin. Okay, that's 2016. Now, the other thing is Snowden. Ed Snowden. What a patriot, What a patriot, what he did, okay? Now, Snowden got out of Hong Kong. Snowden happens to be a friend of mine. I've met him a couple of times. He lives a pretty good life now. He's got a little boy. They live in Russia, let's just say that, okay? Now, how was it that with everyone from the CIA to the least liaison service was looking for how did he get out onto an airfloat plane of all things? It was Julian Assange. He called in all his chips from that part of the world. Suzie probably knows this better than I do, but what I'll include here is a little vignette. Last time I saw Julian, or maybe it was next to the last, it was in the embassy in Ecuador. I said, Julian, I admire a lot of things that you've done, all right? But none more than getting Ed Snowden out of Hong Kong so he could be free. And Julian is he's sort of a taciturn person normally, but he jumped off the couch and he said, yes, we had to make it possible that a fellow like Ed Snowden would not suffer the fate of so many others. So
Suzie,
there again,
yeah.
this was against the deep state, and finally, as has been mentioned, Vault 7. Man, those were the family jewels, and everybody knows about them now. And that, of course, was somebody who had some patriotic instincts within the NSA, apparently, according to what's been in the press, and gave them to Julian. And Julian was circumspect at first in publicizing the ones, but when negotiations for his release fell apart, and this is on very good authority, when people intervened, like the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, intervened and said, no, we're not going to bargain with Julian Assange. He said, all right, the whole 9 yards gets released now. And that's when you got virtually all of Vault 7. So there's a litany of sins for which Julian would be put in at least purgatory, probably hell forever, together with Don Rumsfeld and all those other guys, if the deep state had its way.
I want to focus on both of those issues that you raise, Ray. And so I'll start with you, Suzie. Is how exactly did Julian help Edward Snowden get to Moscow? Because that seems to be a spy story. And I don't know if you guys know that after college, I got my start writing in Hollywood, and I wrote a couple of thrillers. And I haven't written a thriller since then, but this might make for a good thriller. So Suzie, could you fill us in on those details?
It's the best thriller, really. Ed was in hot water. Ed applied for refugee status in Hong Kong at WikiLeaks' suggestion. Ed had reached out to WikiLeaks, and Ed wanted to keep distance. Actually, Ed made a lot of very noble decisions that were probably to his detriment at the time, but he wanted to keep distance between himself and the reporters. He didn't want to contribute in any way to detracting from the potency of the stories that were being reported based on the documents which he had leaked. So he leaked. When I say leaked, I shouldn't really use that term because it's not really true. He leaked to the journalists for them to use their journalistic skills and expertise to filter through and to report on the content. So he found himself somewhat adrift in Hong Kong for a period of time. And so this has been covered extensively elsewhere, so I won't go too much into detail. He was taken care of by some other asylum seekers in Hong Kong for a short period of time, while there was a literal manhunt on for him.
Yeah.
And probably the extent and veracity of that manhunt has not been reported on so much to date, but suffice it to say, I would say that half of the spies in South Asia had been rerouted to Hong Kong to go for him in that period of time. Fortunately, Julian decided to take a few extra steps. And first thing he did was send an extremely brave journalist, Sarah Harrison, who was then a publications editor for WikiLeaks, to Hong Kong to meet up with Snowden. From that point, they got really great legal counsel, international lawyers as well. And they managed to get Snowden out of Hong Kong. Originally, he was to go to Ecuador via Cuba, I believe, but that fell through. By this point, it wasn't just spies on the manhunt, it was international media as well. He had a slew of MSM reporters flying various places around the world and booking themselves on flights desperately thinking that they were going to be able to sit next to Snowden and ask all the questions. Of course, Julian, however, had booked Snowden onto myriad flights on myriad airlines to myriad locations in order to obscure Snowden's actual path of escape. He flew from Hong Kong. It was quite famously known, I think, that the US had frozen Snowden's passport. However, they had managed to misspell his middle name in the order to cancel his passport. And so the Hong Kong authorities have said, we're sorry, but this documentation is actually not accurate. Therefore, we can't apply this order. And
yay for anal retentiveness.
There was a really brilliant press statement actually put out by the Hong Kong authorities at the time, which explained exactly how this administrative mistake had occurred, which had allowed Snowden to escape. And then in the next paragraph, it said, in the meantime, Snowden documents expose US spying on Chinese university students, blah, blah, blah. So it was absolutely hilarious. Obviously, somebody made a decision that they should stick by the book to the documentation, which was inaccurate, and therefore allow Snowden to leave. Snowden was transiting through Russia, and at that point, his passport was cancelled, red notice was issued, et cetera, and he ended up stuck in the transit lounge with Sarah Harrison for I think it was definitely more than 30 days. I can't remember, I want to say 36 or something like that days here. In the meantime, he applied for temporary asylum in a large number of countries, all of which got the US State Department call threatening them with God knows what if they accepted the temporary asylum claim. And ultimately, Russia granted him temporary asylum because what else could they do? They can't let him live in the airport for the rest of his life. So, and in the meantime, of course, very helpfully, you had heads of US intelligence agencies threatening to kill him or jail him for his life on international television, which is pretty good evidence for an asylum claim. So that's how that happened. But it was absolutely Julian, WikiLeaks funds and network that were used to save Snowden's life. And Julian did say on multiple occasions that this was a watershed moment. It was important to show that if people were to take the brave step of leaking, of sharing the truth with the public, that there were others and other avenues that would help and assist them, and that there would be an opportunity for them to achieve some level of safety and even to be able to work. And Snowden has done all types of amazing and incredible work since his life was saved by Julian.
While we're waiting for, go ahead, Ray. Go ahead. Ray, please.
Thanks, Suzie. That's really helpful. That background is essential. I would add just two small things. Now, when this unprecedented worldwide investigation to try to find Ed Snowden was in train, they were looking in all the likely places, right? I mean, they were looking in all the high rises and all the fancy hotels in Hong Kong, and they were looking among the upper crust, okay? Julian was nowhere to be found. I mean, Ed was nowhere to be found. He, my Irish grandmother told me about the upper crust. She said there's a bunch of crumbs held together by a lot of dough, okay? Now those crumbs
that's a good
were
saying.
Not where
I'm going to steal it, by the way.
Yeah, please. Yeah, the upper crust, a bunch of crumbs held together by a lot of dough. Okay, well, he was not among the upper crust. He was somewhere else. This is no secret now. It's been sort of revealed.
Yeah. It was in the movie.
Julian had this incredible capability to tap into what's needed,
Mm-hmm.
And he was a friend of oppressed people too, people living on the margins and people not living in the high rises in Hong Kong. Okay,
right.
So that's another little facet of the story. I hope you'll agree with that, Suzie. Okay, the other thing, what's the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, Putin.
Putin doesn't like Ed Snowden.
Well, no, he was asked, he was asked on film, Mr. President Putin, do you think that Ed Snowden did the right thing? And Putin said, no, he didn't do the right thing. Well, then why did you give him
asylum.
Permission to stay in Russia? Yeah, temporary asylum. Permanent asylum now.
No, permanent residency, technically.
Okay,
and now citizenship.
Got it. But Putin said, well, he didn't say what Suzie just said. Well, we're going to leave him and shut him yet at the airport forever. No. He said, well, nobody else would take him. And it's the right thing for a country to do, to give political asylum in such cases. So now, why did Putin say that? No, he didn't agree with what Ed Snowden did. Well, for God's sake, he's an ex-KGB officer. Yeah. Is he going to say, oh, yeah, that's a good idea? No, of course not. But when push came to shove, he said, I followed international law here. He asked for asylum. Nobody else would give him asylum. Everybody else was too afraid of the United States. I gave him asylum. Enough said.
Yeah, that's the issue I wanted to raise with both of you, and with John when he hops back on. Do you guys think that this affected the West's reaction towards Ed Snowden, or not the West, but rather the intelligence service, that they just had it in for Putin over Ed Snowden? Did this affect their view of Putin, or do you think it was minor, just a blip on the road?
I'm going to lean on the amazing MI6 whistleblower Annie Marchand, who's the only person that I've seen to date who made the very astute observation that the vitriol, the hatred with which West has targeted Russia, particularly since 2013, is absolutely in direct relation to them granting asylum for Snowden. That the whole Russiagate, that everything else that has been, manufactured since then has been about the defaming of Russia, the deplatforming of Russia, that everything else that we see is directly tied to that. It's not only for that reason. Obviously, there is generations of beef underlying it, but it is absolutely a sticking point for them. And such as I said in the case of Julian, they want to create a precedent, like they want to put the word out, don't even dare do this. And of course, they have their own workforce to worry about. And they were absolutely petrified post-Snowden that there would be other Snowdens from within the agencies. And they actually went to they introduced an entire anti-Snowden protocol where they reworked all of their internal processes and procedures to try and make sure that they could identify the next Snowden before he ever even got out of the United States, let alone to pass documents to anyone else, etc. So yeah, I absolutely believe that's a factor in this, and I respect greatly that all of the people and countries and groups that have one way or another helped to preserve Snowden for the world, for all of us. And I wish that we could achieve the same thing for Julian. I very much wish that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is, see, and I mean no disrespect to these two gentlemen when I say the following, that see, Edward Snowden, a brave man, no question, but the fact is the information that he had access to, now that he is no longer in an American intelligence service or an intelligence service subcontractor, his danger into the future is fairly limited. Whereas I think there's a perception that if Julian Assange were let loose, he'd continue with WikiLeaks, encouraging more people to come forward with abuses and illegalities and immoralities. And so I think that in a sense, and I don't mean this in any pejorative way, but I think that they're more afraid of Julian Assange being free than Edward Snowden being free. Do you see my rationale? Ray, would you agree?
Well, I think it's hard to distinguish these things. I would point out that, again, what Suzie says is right on target. Annie Marchand is one of the most astute political observers I've run into. But there's another factor in broader geostrategic terms. 2013, in some ways, this was the apogee. Now, you'll be surprised to hear this probably, but this was the height of friendly U.S.-Russian relations.
Yeah.
How so?
Yeah, there's before the coup of 14 in
yeah, well, this is 13 we're talking about, and Putin pulled Obama's chestnuts out of the fire. Obama didn't want to start a war in Syria. He was under great pressure by all his advisors and by Congress to do precisely that. Putin offered him a way out, to have those Syrian chemical weapons destroyed under UN supervision on a US ship outfitted to destroy chemical weapons. That got Obama off the hook, to the point where the New York Times on the 12th of September 2013 published an op-ed by Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, which said, our growing trust is something I really relish. Not only the trust between our countries, but the trust between our presidents, President Obama and myself. The only thing I don't agree with President Obama on is what he said last week, that the U.S. is the sole exceptional country in the world. I don't think that makes sense. There are poor nations, there are nations close to democracy. I think that God looks on all these countries and finds no exceptional ones, finds them all to be equal. Now, that threw down the gauntlet to people like Victoria Noland and all these other growing trust. Growing trust. We can't have that. 6 months later, we have the coup in Kiev on the Maidan, and you know the rest of that story. So it was certainly Ed played into this, but also the geopolitical things here, where you had the budding trust here. Obama grateful for it, and Obama not willing or able to stand up to the likes of Victoria Nuland, John Brennan, and the rest of the deep state, which is a very real entity.
Yeah, I mean, this whole situation from the point of view of the Russians, that they helped them out in the Syria situation and all the rest of it is building trust. And then 6 months later, they manufactured the coup in Kiev. That was the wake-up call for the Russians. That was when they realized, hey, we're going to have a war with these people. So we have to postpone this war so that we can prepare. And here we are, in the middle of it. I wanted to toss a question to John, but John is still not back with us. But
let me intervene here. It's not that the Russians had to prepare; it's that NATO had to prepare a fighting force to force the Russians out of Donbass. We know what happened now.
Yep.
John Brennan went to
famous
Kiev,
right
after the coup. And the idea was, okay, we're going to rebuild your forces. We're going to train 10,000 people each year. And then we're going to take back the Donbass and we're going to threaten Russia. Okay. Now, that's what was in play here. And Putin was trying through what were called the Minsk Accords, which Ukraine had signed up to, and which Germany and France had guaranteed, which would have given these provinces in the east, Donetsk and Lugansk, a measure of autonomy under a new constitution. That went by the board, and we have the former Prime Minister of Ukraine owning up to the fact that they were never taking Minsk seriously. It was just a stratagem to postpone the years until they could get trained up so that they could take on the Russians. And that happened, 2014, 2021. So you got 6 or 7 years. And that's why Russia faced a much more formidable foe than anyone expected, including perhaps the Russians.
Well, no, that's. I think that the Russians had a very, very clear idea at the beginning of this conflict, now in 2022, as to what they were dealing with, and they were very well prepared for it. And the proof is in the pudding, because people in the West, I've noticed, don't quite understand how this war has been prosecuted. And it's been this very slow grinding process, because it's been a deliberate strategy of the Russian army to just slowly be grinding away, as opposed to trying to make any dramatic and spectacular move, because they realize that politically it's to their advantage to make it a slow grinding process that in essence bores the West, because after 7 months, people are at the end of their tether. And of course, with the loss of energy resources, Europe in particular is going through dire straits, and it's going to get a lot worse in the winter. And so the way the Russians have been handling this war has been very effective. But I wanted to go back to the famous Vault 7 that you and John mentioned a couple of times. And I don't know what's happened to John. I hope that he sorts out his communications issues, because I really wanted to bring him in. What were these crown jewels of Vault 7? I mean, first of all, what is Vault 7? And what's in it, and what was released specifically that just made the CIA and the intelligence services of the United States throw a hissy fit?
Shall I intro it, Ray, and you gap, Phil?
Okay, go.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go
I
ahead.
said I'll intro the publications and you can gap fill on whatever I
Sure.
miss. Because
I'm a
Ray
good
is just
gap filler.
Oh, yes, you are. You are. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so Vault 7 was a WikiLeaks publication of a large cache of documents that had been supplied to them by a whistleblower who some people think was Joshua Schulte, who is unfortunately in extremely perilous circumstances in a US black site / prison right now and on US soil.
He's an American
Essentially
citizen?
a CIA whistleblower. We don't. Julian never confirms or denies who the source of a WikiLeaks publication is. So that's why I kind of go around the issue there. I can't definitively say one way or the other as to who is the source, but that's who many people believe to be the source.
Can you repeat the name, please? I didn't quite catch
Joshua Schulte, Schulte. Am I correct, Ray?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And he was CIA?
He would have been a CIA contractor. Such
he's disappeared.
one of the bums on seats that John Kiriakou was just telling you about before. He has been arrested. He has been accused of possessing child pornography, which is this strange charge that somehow seems to be applied to a multitude of whistleblowers that end up leaking files or documents. Joshua Schulte is not the only leaker who has somehow then had that accusation leveled at him, but obviously they're far more concerned about whether or not he actually leaked these documents. So WikiLeaks always themed and named their publications so that they could promote and get the most possible views for them, which they did very successfully. So Vault 7 is the name that they branded that publication. They released a series of very enigmatic images across about a 6-week period to let people know something was going to drop, and then these documents hit. The documents contained a number of absolutely shocking revelations. Actually, part of that was about the ability for intelligence agencies to hack and commandeer vehicles, as Ray was mentioning earlier. Another one, which I won't talk much about because I know it's Ray's favorite topic, is the Marble framework, in which it laid out the CIA's method of impersonating Russian, North Korean, and who was Ray will tell you who the third was.
Chinese.
Because Chinese, when they're perpetrating hacks and penetrations of networks, so they would disguise themselves as being a Chinese intelligence agency or a Russian intelligence agency, et cetera, et cetera. And this was their whole framework for how precisely to do that at a technical level. There was all types of things about zero-day exploits of major commercial software platforms, operating systems, devices, etc. One of the big revelations, particularly for activists and independent journalists and anyone who was using encrypted, end-to-end encrypted messaging applications, was the CIA's ability to completely bypass encrypted messaging systems on your mobile device, so that they would penetrate your device at the hardware level, and therefore, and also operating system, and therefore any encryption that was occurring in application after that, sorry, too late, they're already recording every single keyboard stroke. So there is no, and I just like to be very clear, there is no encrypted messaging application or email service which provides you any type of personal protection if you are in any way targeted. And if you're not, all of those comms are getting dragnetted anyway, because they will store the encrypted data packets for the day in the future that they will then be able to, via quantum computing or otherwise, break the encryption protocols if they can't already do that, which they may well be able to, we just don't know yet. So unfortunately, you can have privacy from, like, you know, some script kiddie down the road who might try and hack you, but you're not going to get privacy from the CIA. And we learned that definitively from Vault 7. There had been some questions prior to that as to whether or not there was some degree of security for users, and that was just completely blown apart by Vault 7. But there were other revelations, and Marble framework in particular was very significant in terms of other things that were happening in politics and media. And then I will hand you over to the expert on that, Ray, right now.
Oh, by the way, I'm still here. I'm just moving to a better lighting source because I looked a little
Okay.
too Darth Vader, kind of like Dark Knight of the Soul kind of thing. So anyway,
Suzie,
please, Ray, go ahead. What about marble? What is marble?
well, I have to admonish Suzie for spilling the marbles here. As Suzie has already indicated, this gave the CIA, with lots of help from NSA, we're talking about a billion dollar program here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My friends from NSA were there when this was started. So NSA and CIA were in there together. Now, Mobile Framework allowed people to fiddle around with some of the evidence and make it seem that this or that intercept, or whatever you call it, came from North Korea or Russia or China or Iran or an Arabic country. They worked in 5 languages, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we all remember all the charges about Russian fingerprints on some of those terrible interventions in the election of 2016. That was all hogwash.
Oh yeah.
Some of it had to do with this capability to impute blame to Russia, China, North Korea, Arabic countries, or Iran, but others were just clearly discoverable by people like Suzie, who had the expertise. But Mobile Framework was big, and I mentioned before that when this came out, it only came out because, as I understand it, and Suzie, you may know more, there had been an attempt in early March. Actually, it started around February of 2017, I believe, where Julian was willing to tell the Justice Department who didn't give that terribly damaging information on Hillary and everybody else, and in return for a measure of freedom, a measure of not being, the negotiations were at a tipping point when some dumb lawyer who knew the vice head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Mark Warner, he said, "Well, hey, Senator Warner, do you know about this? Do you know that there's this trade going on between the Justice Department acting as an agent of CIA and WikiLeaks people? Do you know about that?" And Warner said, "No, no one told me that." Well, he looked into it. He immediately called Comey, head of the FBI at the time. Comey told the Justice Department, "Shut that down. We're not going to give Julian any measure of comfort." Now, it was just a week later, if memory serves, that Julian said, "Okay, here it goes." The rest of Vault 7 was released. Correct me if I'm wrong, Suzie.
I wouldn't say that it was punitive, the rest of the release, because Julian was extremely committed to maximizing the scale of publications and putting as much out there as possible. You are correct that there were indications, I'm being very politic here, there were indications that he was, for the first time ever, prepared to not say who did it, but who didn't do it. And
Right.
we know who didn't do it. And we know, and in this case, it's a country rather than a person that didn't do it. And we know that was absolutely derailed at the highest levels, just as the engineering of Julian's expulsion from the Ecuadorian embassy was similarly orchestrated at the highest levels. I'm not particularly convinced that it would necessarily make a difference one way or the other. I don't really, what makes me say that is Trump's failure to pardon Snowden or Assange. And yeah, he might have got on the wrong side of Trump by rejecting Trump's officially not an emissary of Trump that was sent to be an emissary of Trump to the Ecuadorian embassy. But we can't say definitively, but certainly the timeline of events and the events are as Ray described. Absolutely.
No, I mean, this whole situation of Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, of course, they fell on them like a ton of bricks to warn off anybody else. But has it been effective? Because as far as I know, and I'm not as on top of this as you both are, has there been any kind of leak like the Julian Assange and Edward Snowden leaks?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Go ahead.
I mean, Suzie made the point that a lot of this was to preempt what happened, what Ed Snowden did from anybody else doing it. But Ed Snowden was 2013, right?
Yeah.
Vault 7, 2017.
Right.
So, I mean, there still are good people around willing to take great risks to make sure that we're informed about some of the more heinous things going on. Now, I don't know if it was Schulte or anybody else, but this attempt to make sure that this never happened again failed. I witnessed the fact that we have Schulte and hopefully others that will speak out, people of the character of John Kiriakou, who will speak out on a matter of principle. So you can't shut good people down forever. And the proof is in the pudding. They can try, and they are pretty effective intimidating a lot of people. I'll give you a little example here that people probably don't know about. About 2 months ago, I said to myself, McGovern, you know a good bit about Russia, China, Ukraine. You know the history of all this because you're so old, for God's sake. Look, why don't you ask somebody to interview you and let you speak for an hour about how all has happened, okay? And Regis Tremblay, a videographer, said, okay, Ray, I'll do that for you. And he did on the 6th of July. I called it A Taste of the Truth. And I took it through my experience there as a CIA analyst early in the 60s and so forth, and all the way down. And I pointed out that, look, I learned a hell of a lot at government expense. Here's my way of giving back. Believe it or not, but this is what I experienced. This is what I know, okay? Called it A Taste of the Truth. It got up on YouTube. It got all of a sudden 26,000 views. YouTube, shut it down.
Yeah, of course.
So, A Taste of the Truth was too much for YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Now, luckily, it was saved on BitChute and a couple other places. But doesn't that speak volumes that A Taste of the Truth was a little bit too much tasty for YouTube? So this is how it is going here. It's harder for people to see what I say or what I write, but it's still available, and I'm still hopeful. Well, we do what we can. There are reversers, but we don't stop. And one of the things that I'm asked very often, and McGovern, for God's sake, don't you get tired? I mean, you've been doing this for what, 20 years now, since you told us all there were no weapons of mass destruction. What good did that do? Don't you get tired? So I tell him this little story. A good friend of mine, he was a representative from Wisconsin. His name was Dave Obey, okay? He's a good guy. We went to church together, okay? So he's head of the Appropriations Committee, okay? But before that, during Iran-Contra, he's really upset that Schultz and Reagan and the others didn't tell him about Iran-Contra. So he brings Schultz toward the end of this investigation, brings him in to appear before a subcommittee, and he says, now, Secretary of State Schultz, I would like to question you about this. And Schultz, very uncharacteristically, says, Congressman Obey, the American people, they're just sick and tired of this Iran gate. And Obey doesn't miss a breath. He looks down at Schultz and he says, Mr. Schultz, I didn't swear to support and protect the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic, until I got tired. That's the way it is with us, okay? We took that same oath. And
Well, what
so even though the odds are against us, we don't get tired. And maybe we'll come to a no good end, but it isn't because we get tired.
Well, what's happened to me, what I find deeply disturbing about this whole situation is that this kind of repression of leakers and whatnot, it's spreading like a cancer. And because what you said, Suzie, in that video that I watched of yours, it was like an hour-long video where you went through a whole host of different issues. And the notion that these companies of repression are expanding not just into intelligence to prevent leaks. Whether you agree with that or not, it's understandable at least that they would want to prevent leaks from their own agency. But now they are expanding out to silence people who say the wrong thing, who say the thing that they don't agree with, or who highlight information that is publicly available, but that they want to tune down. They don't want people to hear as much of. And this kind of repression is spreading out, and nobody is safe. And it's becoming deeply creepy that so many people now, regular civilians, quote unquote, feel nervous about touching certain topics because they're afraid of the repercussions that could befall them. That they could lose their job or contracts or business opportunities or educational opportunities. It just seems deeply bizarre, and it's not just intelligence; it's also things that are properly the purview of personal belief or political opinion that is frankly inconsequential to the national security of a nation. And so that's where the part for me has really changed, because it's sort of like the scope of this repression and cutting off leaks has expanded, and the remittance has gone global. And that I find deeply disturbing, because I myself, I'm a nobody. I'm a stupid middle-aged YouTuber who's doing these videos for fun. This is an amusement for me. That's all it is.
Wait a second there, Gonzalo. You went to an Ivy League school. Same
Yeah,
as
but they were smoking
Blinken
dope when they accepted me. That's why I
yeah,
got
but
in.
wait a
Man.
second. Don't try to disguise the fact that you have very good pedigree. All right, so you're a pretty bright guy. So if they go after you, they have good reason.
Yeah, Ray, tone down the thing. I promise you $20 after the show for saying nice things about me.
Ray's done his homework. I see. Not surprised at all. Okay.
No, but the thing is, see, like what's happened to me, I did a solo live stream yesterday about this particular issue. Is that in the last couple of weeks, I got suspended from YouTube. I got my Twitter, eliminated, permanently suspended, and I had 70,000 viewers, and it was because I was saying that the Europeans had essentially committed suicide, and that was enough to get me deplatformed from Twitter. And also, back in April, I was arrested and held by the state security services of the Ukraine, and they took my accounts and what have you, because I used to have a fairly large channel, about 300,000 subscribers, and another one of 150,000, and a Twitter account of 60-odd thousand people, and I lost access to all of that stuff. And that Twitter account, for instance, which I had not had access to since the 15th of April, that too was deleted. I mean, it just to unperson me. It was deeply creepy.
No worries, Gonzalo.
No, but
Suzie, please tell us all about Panquake.
Damn it! I wanted to start at censorship and then to get into the deplatforming, and then before we talk about Panquake, I'll tell you a few things you don't know about Panquake. In fact,
Sure.
I might just tell the whole world something you don't know about Panquake. Panquake delivery is happening, regardless of what happens in terms of crowdfunding. Though please do donate at panquake.com/donate.
As soon as the broadcast is over, I'll have those links in the description below, chat.
So 3,700 ordinary members of the public who are sick of getting arbitrary suspensions and shadow bans and sending messages and not knowing if anyone will even be able to see them, and having moderation actions taken against them with no transparency about what the networks are doing, and are thirsty for a not just right or not just left or a not, partisan platform, and actually want to be able to put their voice out and be free of commercial constraints and not have their data captured and sold to corporations and big data companies and security agencies, which happens every single day, came together and they raised $183,000 US, and they funded Panquake, which is panquake.com, which is a new platform that's going to free us of all of the constraints that we have been facing. Now, of course, we're going to be a massive target. Of course, we're going to, it was funny, someone was saying to me yesterday, well, what if YouTube does this to you? And what if Google does this to you? And I said to them, I don't think about that. When I'm doing my security planning, I think about targeted access operations of the NSA and what they're going to do to me, not what YouTube is going to do to me. But the YouTube stuff, the lawyers can worry about. But our architecture, our threat assessment model is slightly different than just like YouTube. But what we're trying to do is what we are in fact doing, we've already built our interface and we're now just doing our back-end integrations. So we can release our betas to the public, is to give people cryptographic proofs of the action taken on the network via the blockchain, including our actions as the network provider, which means if we ban someone, if we suspend someone, if we remove some child porn or whatever off our network, which we absolutely will remove, be all clear about that, there is a cryptographic proof on our blockchain that we took this action against this account on this day at this time. This is the reason why. This is the moderator ID that did it, so that we are bringing transparency to, we're just changing, we're fixing the power imbalance between the platform and the user, right? It shouldn't be all about the focus on the user. Actually, we need the focus on the platform. So the whole network will know what we as the provider do and can hold us accountable for that. But they also have cryptographic proof of the actions that they take when they publish public content. So if 50 people like your Quake message on Panquake, there are 50 blockchain transactions to prove that those people clicked that like button on that piece of content. So we can't come along and unlike it or unretweet, unshare it. We can't violate the actions taken by the users on our network in the shadows, which is what's happening right now, because I'm seeing absolutely, hands down, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, I'm seeing manufactured statistics on Twitter. They can decide how many retweets they want to be on something. They can decide how many likes they want to be on something. They can decide whether or not you see it. The other thing about Panquake is it is algorithm free. Your timeline is in chronological order. You see only content by the people who you followed. So it's completely opt-in for user content. If you didn't follow the account, you don't see their stuff. If you unfollow them, you don't see their stuff. We don't recommend stuff. We don't use any personalization algorithms. We don't decide what we think you might like and stick it in front of you. We have no advertising, no sponsored content, nothing like that. You can't buy space on a Panquake timeline. There is no mechanism by which people can pay us for that. And in all we do ask, because we don't sell your data, we don't capture your data, it's a peer-to-peer network, you exchange your data with other people, your account data is on your device. All we ask is that people pay $5 a month per user, that's it. So you pay a $5 a month subscription and you are free of advertising, free of corporate control. We're registered outside of US jurisdiction. We don't use any US infrastructure or infrastructure of the empire as a whole. We are domiciled in independent, some of the last independent jurisdictions on earth, and our network hosting is there as well. We also don't capture image or video content, and another day we'll talk about how the technical, actually if you're interested, just go look up Panquake on YouTube, you'll find plenty of stuff. Now I've kind of done this in reverse order because I wanted to talk about the censorship problem first rather than talk about Panquake.
Because what I'm finding deeply disturbing is that all of these big platforms, the big monopolistic platforms, number one, they are deliberately kept as monopolies and they are protected by the other players, the other monopoly players, Number two, what I've started seeing is that you're seeing government-sponsored trolling going on Twitter. It's been a big thing. It started with the Ukrainian situation, and it's been expanding. And I'm noticing that it's happening in different nuclei of interests, where you have paid trolls that Twitter allows. Where anything else, they would ban them immediately. But these are the approved trolls, kind
The
of like,
servants of empire.
yeah, exactly. They're like the NGO minions in some countries starting up a color revolution. You know what I'm saying? And they're in Twitter and they attack en masse anybody who's saying things that counter the narrative. And so it's much more interesting than merely trying to suppress information. It's trying to discredit it and make it vanish into the ether so that it just doesn't have a chance to percolate. It's like when Mark Zuckerberg went on Joe Rogan and he admitted that he made Facebook suppress the Joe Biden laptop story, or the Hunter Biden laptop story, prior to the election at the behest of the FBI. I mean, this would have been outrageous not 10 years ago, but now it has been completely normalized. And that part of it, there was less shock over that. That is the thing I find shocking. And the government is acting in ways that are totally fascistic. As I said before, I am a political conservative, and I'm calling it fascistic. And the companies are going along with this because they depend on the government for money. They don't want to make enemies. They're playing it safe. At best, they are acting amorally, if you will. But the U.S. government is certainly acting immorally. And you're right, the empire. My feeling is that, especially as the geopolitical situation begins to deteriorate further and further for the United States, insofar as having perceived losses geopolitically, that the repression will intensify. I mean, if people think that the repression is bad now, wait 5 years. It's going to be much, much worse. That's my thinking at this point. You, Suzie?
Yeah, so I actually haven't been on Twitter for a while now because I spend all my days working day and night. But on my Twitter bio, I say censorship, like surveillance, censorship is a for-profit model. And
Yeah.
that's what I see. So I see that we talked about the subcontractors, the pyramid scheme of surveillance contracting. And now what I see is the formation of a pyramid scheme of censorship. So it used to be that these security contractors would get paid to create spreadsheets of hundreds of names of Twitter users and put them forward to the agencies to check them out and decide, how they want to handle these people, what level of targeting of these people they want to do. Now I see exactly the same processes being used and the same security contractors being used, where the goal is censorship and suppression of speech, rather than just the physical political targeting. I just did want to tell you something just that you said before.
Please.
You were saying, just why me? I'm just like some guy. I used to have the same sensation all the time. I was a single mom from the suburb with 2 kids. All I did was go to a activism movement and try and help feed people and look after people and get their messages out. Like, why me? And first of all, there is because they make money from doing this to you. And secondly, because their end goal is to do this to everyone. Mass surveillance is about collecting all the information, all the data, all the communication. So even if I am not an activist or a journalist or whatever, I can still be in that dragnet. And Bill Binney, I'm now going to trample all over Bill Binney's ground. I spent a couple of hours with him a few days ago, Ray. He always talks about the 2 degrees of separation and how actually for every one target, there are thousands of targets because they target every single person you know or have any connection to in any way in your life. And then they target all of the people that they know as well. So literally, I mean, I come from a country, New Zealand, 5 million people. We had 80 known targets of the GCSB, our spy agency, through the time that I was an activist, including Kim.com was a major one on that list. 80 New Zealanders, how many people do they know each? 100, 200 each? Okay, well, how many do they know each? 100, 200 each, 250 each?
It's the whole country.
How hard is it to get those two hots to cover the entire frigging country on one surveillance warrant? And they do these bulk collection warrants. Now the collection warrants of the intelligence agencies aren't on an individual. It's not on Suzie from Occupy. It's on the city of Auckland, the internet service provider, whatever they call them, bulk collection warrants. They can nominate a company, a geographic location, or get this, they use this word, a class of people.
Oh, that's nice.
A class of people they can get a bulk collection warrant on. So this really does affect everybody. Whether it's because you know someone who knows someone that is of interest to them, they will rake through your entire life. Whether it's because you happen to be in a location that is of interest to them, or whether you are part of a class of people. What is that? Is that students at a university? Is that people at a church? Is that like, what is that class of people? We don't really know. We know that the leader, the head of the agency of the GCSB, says that he spends a dozen hours, going and getting these warrants. But then when they publish the warrant statistics, they only have this tiny little number of warrants that they admit to having per year. So if you have a tiny number of warrants, but you spend all these hours at Parliament getting those warrants, and you can place warrants on a geographic location or class of people, what does it add up to? It adds up to we're all victims. The only question is whether you know it or not. And I completely agree. We're past the point of needing another church committee. Like, we need a freaking Nuremberg for these people, because what we haven't got to yet is that surveillance kills. Surveillance kills. If you are under surveillance and you know it, it damages your mental health. It damages your relationships. They interfere in every aspect of your life. They literally kill people. They drive them to suicide. Some cases, they actually do much worse things that I don't even want to really talk about. But
Yeah, like Michael Hastings. Yeah. I mean,
the classic example. Exactly
when
right.
I heard that story, when I heard that story, I was like, no, they crashed his car. No, it's like the two bullets in the back of the head, and it's called suicide. No, that was most definitely
Gary Whip, absolutely.
They manipulated. They manipulated the automobile. By the way, there was some interesting data. This actress who was killed recently, Anne H. There's video evidence of her trying to stop the car as it was like caroming at 60 miles an hour in some Los Angeles suburban street. And it went by some security camera, and you could hear the sound. And if you're mechanically inclined and know anything about cars, you could hear how the handbrake had been pulled on the car. Because when you drive a car with the handbrake, which is not designed to do, it makes a very distinctive sound. It was clearly that this poor woman's car had been tampered with, and she was caroming at 60 odd miles an hour, 70 miles an hour through the suburban street, and eventually crashed and apparently was killed. And this kind of thing, crazy as it may sound, because I'm not one for conspiracy theories. I do believe that Paul is alive and Elvis dead and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. But some of the things that come up, you're like, no, come on, that's not how that happened. I mean, come on, I didn't fall off the turnip truck, yesterday. It was, the week before last, but still, it's been a while enough that I'm not that damn stupid, But they consistently push narratives that are so absurd, and they expect everyone to believe them. They use their positions of authority to that they're part of the mainstream media and whatnot, so that you're sort of like you feel impolite to disagree. And I think that's one of the problems that we're having. Ray?
Gonzalo, apropos of all this, what happened to John Kiriakou?
I don't know what happened to him.
I know.
Oh,
He actually emailed his apologies. His internet went out. At first it was choppy, and then it was gone.
Okay.
And
So he's safe.
So he's safe. I did suggest to him that he seek an alternative method of connecting, and hopefully he will come back. I know he'd love to be here with us.
Yeah, because look, the standing offer to John, if he's listening, I'll be happy to have him on again at another opportunity because it was a delight to talk for him for hour briefly.
Yeah.
Ray,
Now,
go ahead,
Gonzalo,
please. Yeah.
Gonzalo, you're in Kharkov.
Yes.
How come I don't hear any rockets or bombings or anything like that? What have you to add from your specific vantage point?
Well, let me see. On September 9th, Friday, September 9th, there was a big strike here in the city of Kharkov. They hit a number of targets. They were all about a dozen targets, or a little over a dozen targets, within minutes of each other. It was simultaneous. Clearly, a Russian. I don't know what. I mean, it was Russian, no question. And they actually hit one of the buildings next to mine. I have pretty spectacular pictures, but I can't share them because it shows the Kharkov skyline, and you could identify or figure out where I'm at. And I want to keep that information private for the time being. Yeah, it was very spectacular. But after that, and there were also two blackouts that day, Friday, that evening. There was a blackout for about 6 hours. And then on Tuesday last, a week ago today, there was another 6-hour blackout. But since then, there hasn't been any blackouts. There have been various theories as to why the Russians would have taken out the electrical grid in just about the whole country. One very shrewd observation that was made was that this was during the so-called Kharkov offensive. And Russian forces might have wanted to slow down the movement of troops because, you see, the train system works on electricity. And so knocking out the power, no trains. Ergo, you can't move troops and tanks. And so it might have been that, or it might have been a show of force, or whatever other reason. And the Russians, I know, I know enough of the Russian military, at least, that they don't go to the bathroom without a plan, and they don't do things for no reason. They have very, very good reasons for just about everything that they do. And so if they did this approach of knocking out the lights twice, but not bothering after that, even though they could do it whenever they want, they must have had a specific reason for it. It wasn't just, to quote unquote terrorize the population. Because in fact, these two blackouts were the only blackouts, have been the only blackouts here in the city of Kharkov since the beginning of this conflict, or more properly, since I arrived here on the 1st of March, because between the 24th of February and the 1st of March, I was in Kiev. And there weren't any blackouts there either. And I came on the 1st of March, and since then, until September 9th, the electricity, internet, everything, mobile phones, everything worked perfectly fine until Friday the 9th for 6 hours, and then Tuesday the 13th for 6 hours. And since then, it's been relatively quiet. I don't know what is going on, except what I get from publicly available sources, because I'm a chicken, and I just want to stay away from the bullets and the artillery shells because they're horrifying, and I don't want any piece of that. And the people who have had to suffer a lot of damage and whatnot because of this conflict, my hearts go out to them. But yeah, I try to stay away from all of that, and the information I get really is from the internet. And I'm staying here. I originally came here because my wife and my children are here. I had gone to Kiev on business. I literally arrived the night before. I was supposed to be there just for 2 nights and then come back. But I was stuck there for a bit and took the train down here. My wife and children, they have already left. They spent the summer in Western Europe, and they had a lovely time. And I stayed here helping out my in-laws, and just, and now, quite frankly, because of my situation with the SBU, they've asked me not to leave the city. And they told me that if I try to leave the country, they'll know about it because they'll check me at the border and that I'll be arrested. And so that's why, as a practical matter, I really can't leave. Yeah, I'm staying here, and quite frankly, I want to see what happens. I want to see how this situation plays out. I'm very, very surprised that it has lasted as long as it has. I mean, if you had told me on February 24th that we'd be into September and this would still be going on, I would have been truly shocked, because I would have thought that they would have negotiated a ceasefire and some sort of agreement to end the hostilities. But the Zelensky regime clearly has no intention of doing that. They're intent on fighting to the bitter end. And I think it's going to be extremely bitter. I think that from the very beginning, Washington has to understand two things. Number one, this was an existential war for Russia. They had to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO. And they certainly were not going to allow Ukraine to invade the Donbass as they were planning to, number one. And that's the first truth. And number two, the Russian armed forces are simply better equipped. They have more manpower and they are better led and better supplied than the Ukraine armed forces. So when you have two unequal fighters in a ring, the result is inevitable. And there's simply no contest. When you have a bantamweight going up against a heavyweight, there's no question as to what's going to happen. And see, if you have, to continue the metaphor, if you have the manager of the bantamweight, keeps on telling him, keep on going, keep on fighting, you'll win against Mike Tyson here in front of you. You are the one who are going to be hurt, and hurt in a way that you won't recover from. And that's the tragedy of the Ukraine situation. They have been goaded by the West into a war that will destroy Ukraine, destroy a generation of Ukrainians. And because of the exodus of people, especially the most educated people, the most hardworking people, those people have fled to the West, where they were received with open arms, which is all very nice and good. But see, they will have no incentive to return to Ukraine after the hostilities are over. And it's credibly estimated that something like 11 million people have left Ukraine, a country of 44 million. Roughly a quarter of the population has fled the country. Some 3 million, or a little bit more than 3 million, has fled to Russia, and the rest to the West. And those people will never return.
How about the folks that are still there in Kharkov, for example? Is there any war weariness, or are they the patriotic Ukrainians, or how's the man in the street feel about this there in Kharkov?
I have a very limited contact with people, but I can say that for the most part, in March, the city was empty. I mean, I'm talking empty. If you had told me that 80% of the population had fled the city, I would have said, yeah, that sounds about right, perhaps more. But now there's a lot of life in the city. A lot of people have come back. You see cars on the roads and going in different places. I mean, it seems semi-normalish. There are lots of restaurants that are open and so forth. A lot of businesses, though, are permanently closed. I suspect, okay, this is my suspicion, but it's fairly correct, that the people who came back are Russian, ethnic Russians, pro-Russia. And so that's why they're here. I think that there is the fundamental expectation that eventually Russia will take the city, because the people who were truly pro-Ukrainian, who were Ukrainian ethnic Ukrainians, they've left and they are not coming back to Kharkov. This I know for a fact of certain acquaintances that I know who are ethnically Ukrainian and are very anti-Russian. And they have no intention of coming back. And so I think that a lot of people who have come back and who are trying to get on with their lives are people who fully expect themselves to be Russian citizens within the next year or two. And that is a credible possibility, because the cities that have been captured by Russia, they've offered the people there to get a Russian passport and Russian citizenship. And it's a very simple bureaucratic process. The line sometimes can be long, but apparently the process itself takes 15 minutes, and you leave there with a Russian passport. Yeah. Or, well, actually, you leave with a ticket.
Thanks.
And then you'll get the Russian passport, but you know what I mean. But the thing is, see, this is a civil war, okay? And people are choosing sides. And Kharkov is a Russian city. It is a traditionally Russian city. It is a majority ethnic Russian. Everybody speaks Russian here, unlike in the West where they speak Ukrainian. And so, yeah, the expectation is that this will eventually fall to the Russians. That's the expectation at this time.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to have to leave in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to wind it
so-
down because it's been a great conversation. But it's, there's the song by Michelle Schacht, "The secret to a long life is knowing when it's time to go." So anyway, on that, I want to invite you both to give like a final note as to the topic that we've been discussing here. I should have prepared you before and told you about it, but is there anything that you want to leave the listener with, and any final thought that you think would be worthwhile for them to carry with them after the end of the show? Suzie, can I throw it to you, please?
Oh, there's so much.
There's so much.
There is so much. Having read thousands of Snowden documents, I have a head full of knowledge that I wish that the average person had. And I can only encourage them to, and this goes for WikiLeaks documents too, to go to WikiLeaks and actually search key terms and educate yourself, because a man sacrificed his life, and many other lives have one way or another been impacted by it, for the knowledge that is sitting in that database, just waiting for people to consume. Learn about how the world really works, and in those documents you'll find them, because when you read the documents of the agencies, you get a completely different picture than you get watching some CNN produced like short documentary about them. The media does not tell you the truth about how these agencies work.
No.
It's probably a whole other show for me to share what I know about the inner workings of these agencies. It's actually something I would love you to learn about, Gonzalo, because I think it directly impacts your life. And when you obtain this type of knowledge, there are ways in which you can alter your choices and in your own life, which will put you in a slightly better position than you would otherwise have been. So to be a target like you obviously are, and I feel great solidarity with you because your life is at risk, that's a fact, and you are a target, that's a fact. For you, I would love you to learn as much as you can in order to empower yourself in your own situation. And Julian did exactly that. He empowered targets to better be able to survive their own situation. In terms of final messages, I just want to say I love Ray McGovern so much. He's one of my favorite people on the face of this planet. I call him Grandpa.
Well, do you want me to leave so I can leave you two alone together? I don't know.
Actually, no. One of the reasons I love him so much is because he reminds me of my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, and who fought from 39 until nearly all the way through 44. My grandfather and his brother went to war, and only my grandfather came home. And Ray reminds me very much of my grandfather, and so I've always just felt a natural affinity to him for that reason, but also because he's a walking encyclopedia like Julian. And when Ray talks, I feel like I can sit here and listen all night, because just as WikiLeaks is a great resource, and just as the Snowden documents are a great resource, sitting here and listening to Ray and his experiences and his knowledge is similarly a resource like that. So yeah, I really don't have much else to say except thank you to you for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, come by whenever you want to, please.
Well, I'd love to talk about Russia. I don't know much about Ukraine. You're actually the only person I kind of know who's in Ukraine. Ray is a totally different kettle of fish. He will know an immense amount about Ukraine. I do know about Russia because I've been here for 7 years, and I can give my own experiences at another time.
We'll definitely have you on again to discuss life in Russia. Yeah,
cool. That would be awesome. Yeah, love you, Ray.
Yeah, and Ray, what final thought would you like to leave us with?
Well, I'd like to have everyone who's watching or listening know how to spell panquake. It's that pan again that you mentioned initially, and I'm going to spell it. And Suzie, you correct me if I'm wrong, okay? PANQUAKE, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Now that's the outcome of an immense effort by people who know what they're doing, and I look very hopefully to that as resource for something like the fifth estate that Julian himself created and enabled us to learn from. The other thing I'll simply say is one of my heroes was a Hungarian Jew named Ferenc, who became an army lawyer and was one of the last prosecutors at Nuremberg. He was asked, for his advice as to what we all should do to try to be as tenacious as he was in pursuing justice. And he said, he says, there are just three things. You never give up. You never give up. And you never give up. That's it, folks. I'm pleased to be with folks who never give up.
And on that note, I think that we should call it a stream. I want to thank you, all my gentlemen, all my guests rather, including John Kiriakou, Suzie Dawson, Ray McGovern. Like I said before, the links to find them will be in the description below. I neglected to do that before, but by the time this goes up, you'll see it. And John, if you're listening, like I said, I'd love to have you back on again. I hope you sort out your internet issues. And Suzie and Ray, of course, you are always welcome whenever you'd like to. Chat, thanks so much. I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I will catch you next time. Take it easy.
Bye.